Marcus Chen moved through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Station with quiet efficiency, his cleaning cart gliding silently on magnetic wheels. The massive space station served as a neutral trading hub for dozens of alien species, and Marcus had been working here for 3 years without causing a single incident. That was exactly how he liked it. The other species barely noticed him. To the tall, blue-skinned Valorians, he was just another primitive human doing menial work. The crystalline Jektar regarded him as useful furniture. Even the insectoid Kresh, who prided themselves on observational skills, saw only what they expected to see: a simple janitor in standard gray coveralls. Marcus preferred it that way. He kept his sleeves rolled down, his head down, and his mouth shut. His supervisor, a Valorian named Tech Lon, treated him with the casual dismissal reserved for lower life forms. The pay was decent, the work was honest, and nobody asked questions about his past. That changed on a Tuesday morning when the station's artificial gravity failed in Section C. Marcus was cleaning the observation deck when the gravity generators stuttered. Coffee cups and data tablets began floating in lazy arcs. Several alien traders panicked, flailing helplessly in the weightless environment. A group of Valorian diplomats crashed into the transparent aluminum windows, their elegant robes tangled around their long limbs. But Marcus didn't panic. Without thinking, he pushed off from his cart with practiced ease, caught a floating Kresh merchant before the insectoid could crash into a support beam, and guided the alien to a handhold near the emergency controls. His movements were smooth, controlled, efficient, the movements of someone who had spent significant time in zero gravity. A young Jektar named Crystalline Song of Seven noticed. Her species communicated through harmonic vibrations in their crystal bodies, and she had been studying human behavior for her dissertation. She watched Marcus move through the weightless space like he belonged there, helping panicked aliens reach safety points while simultaneously checking the gravity generator controls. "Fascinating," she chimed in her musical language. "That human moves like a void walker." Teklon, who was gripping a wall panel in obvious distress, managed to speak through gritted teeth. "Impossible. He's just a janitor. Humans are barely spacefaring." Marcus had the gravity restored within 10 minutes. The other species assumed the automatic systems had fixed themselves. Only Crystalline Song of Seven had noticed the small adjustments Marcus made to the generator controls. Adjustments that required intimate knowledge of advanced graviton manipulation technology. Over the following weeks, Crystalline Song of Seven began to pay closer attention to the human janitor. She observed how he instinctively ducked before low-hanging conduits that he couldn't possibly have seen, how he always positioned himself with clear sightlines to all exits, how his eyes constantly scanned crowds, cataloging threats and escape routes. Most intriguingly, she noticed how carefully he kept his sleeves rolled down, even when performing strenuous work in the station's warmer sections. Whatever he was hiding beneath those sleeves, he was very determined to keep it hidden. The breakthrough came during a routine diplomatic reception in the station's central plaza. Representatives from 6 species had gathered to negotiate a new trade agreement. Marcus was working nearby, emptying waste receptacles and pretending not to listen to the conversations around him. The negotiations were tense. The Kresh hive mind wanted exclusive mineral rights to the Outer Rim territories. The Valorians demanded cultural preservation clauses. The reptilian Saurog insisted on military escort privileges for their cargo ships. Each species brought their own guards, their own translators, their own subtle threats. Marcus was collecting trash near the Valorian delegation when Ambassador Veltar's aide dropped a data slate. The device hit the floor and its protective case cracked, revealing a holographic display of classified military specifications. The aide quickly scooped it up, but not before Marcus caught a glimpse of the contents. His blood went cold. Those weren't trade agreements. They were fleet positions, ship classifications, weapons inventories. The Valorians were planning something, and it wasn't diplomatic. Marcus forced himself to continue working, but Crystalline Song of Seven was watching. She saw the subtle change in his posture, the way his eyes sharpened, the almost imperceptible shift from janitor to something else entirely. The reception continued peacefully, but Marcus spent the rest of his shift thinking. The Valorians had always been the most dismissive of human capabilities. They saw Earth as a backwater planet with nothing to offer but cheap labor and raw materials. But those fleet positions suggested they might be planning to take what they wanted by force. That evening, Marcus returned to his small quarters in the station's human residential section. He sat on his narrow bunk and rolled up his left sleeve for the first time in 3 years. The tattoo was exactly as he remembered it, a stylized sword surrounded by stars, with a banner bearing the words, Si vis pacem parabellum. Below it, in smaller script, were numbers that most people would assume were dates. But they weren't dates. They were kill counts, mission codes, unit designations. Marcus Chen wasn't just a janitor. He was Marcus Chen, formerly of the Human Colonial Marine Special Forces. Reconnaissance Division, Deep Strike Unit 7. He had been part of the first wave of human exploration into alien space, gathering intelligence and preparing for the day when humanity would need to defend itself. That day might be coming sooner than anyone expected. The next morning, Crystalline Song of Seven positioned herself near Marcus's usual cleaning route. She had been working up the courage to speak to him for days, but her natural Jektar curiosity finally overcame her caution. "Excuse me?" she chimed politely. "I am conducting research on human adaptation patterns. Might I ask you some questions?" Marcus looked up from his work, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm just a janitor, miss. I don't think I'd be much help with your research." "Oh, but I think you would be very helpful indeed." Her crystal structure shifted color slightly, a sign of excitement in her species. "Your movement patterns suggest extensive zero-gravity training. Your spatial awareness indicates military experience, and your reaction times, I think you're mistaken." Marcus's voice remained level, but there was something in his eyes that made Crystalline Song of Seven's crystals dim slightly. "I've just been working on stations for a while. You pick things up." But she wasn't deterred. "Perhaps we could discuss it over a meal? I understand humans have a tradition of sharing food during conversations." Before Marcus could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the public address system crackled to life. "Attention all residents and visitors. This is Station Commander Korath. We have detected multiple unidentified vessels approaching Nexus Station. All non-essential personnel are to report to designated safety areas immediately." This is not a drill. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see ships emerging from faster-than-light jumps. Sleek, predatory vessels with the distinctive blue and silver markings of the Valorian Imperial Navy. Marcus stared at the approaching fleet, his mind automatically cataloging ship classes and probable armament. 3 dreadnoughts, 8 heavy cruisers, dozens of fighters already launching from carrier bays. This wasn't a show of force. This was an invasion. Crystalline Song of Seven's harmonics took on a fearful pitch. Why would the Valorians bring a war fleet to a neutral station? Marcus was already moving, but he stopped long enough to look back at her. For just a moment, his carefully maintained facade slipped, and she saw something in his eyes that made her crystal structure vibrate with recognition. "Because they don't believe anyone here can stop them," he said quietly. As chaos erupted around them, Marcus began rolling up his sleeves. The approaching fleet opened communications, and Ambassador Veltar's face appeared on screens throughout the station. His usual diplomatic smile was gone, replaced by cold authority. "Citizens of Nexus Station," he announced. "By order of the Valorian Imperial Council, this facility is now under our protection. We have reason to believe that illegal weapons shipments have been passing through this station, threatening the peace of the galaxy. We will be conducting a thorough inspection of all vessels and cargo. Compliance is not optional." Marcus knew it was a lie. The weapons specifications he'd glimpsed weren't evidence of illegal shipments. They were an inventory of what the Valorians planned to seize. Nexus Station sat at a crucial junction of hyperspace lanes. Control it, and you controlled trade routes worth trillions of credits. But the other species didn't know that. They saw an overwhelming military force and an excuse that sounded plausible. Station Commander Koreth, a pragmatic Kresh, was already ordering compliance with Valorian demands. Marcus finished rolling up both sleeves. His tattoos were fully visible now, not just the Special Forces insignia, but others that told the story of a career spent in places that officially didn't exist. Combat drops on hostile worlds, reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines, operations that existed only in classified files. Crystalline Song of Seven stared at the markings on his arms, her academic mind working to decode their meaning. She had studied human military traditions, but these symbols were unlike anything in her research. "Who are you really?" she asked. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coveralls and pulled out something he hadn't touched in 3 years, a small, innocuous data chip that looked like a standard maintenance key. "Just a janitor," he said. "But sometimes janitors see things that other people miss." He inserted the chip into a nearby maintenance terminal. The station's internal communications network came alive with activity as hidden subroutines activated. Emergency protocols that had been buried deep in the system's architecture began to unfold. Somewhere in the depths of human space, automated beacons received coded transmissions. Ships that had been waiting for 3 years began powering up their engines. Marcus had not been just gathering intelligence during his time on Nexus Station. He had been preparing for exactly this moment. As the first Valorian boarding shuttles approached the station's docking bays, Marcus Chen transformed from janitor to soldier. But he wasn't alone anymore. Crystalline Song of Seven watched him work, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "What can I do to help?" she asked. Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "This isn't your fight." "Perhaps not," she replied, her crystal structure taking on determined hues. "But I have been studying human behavior for 2 years. I find myself very curious to see what happens when humans stop pretending to be harmless." Despite everything, Marcus smiled. "In that case, you might want to find somewhere with a good view. Things are about to get interesting." The Valorians had made a crucial miscalculation. They had assumed that humans were exactly what they appeared to be, a primitive species doing simple work for more advanced civilizations. They had forgotten the first rule of intelligence gathering: always assume your enemy is smarter than they look. Marcus activated another hidden protocol, and throughout Nexus Station, seemingly innocent maintenance workers began revealing their true nature. The quiet cook in the Kresh restaurant had been a demolitions expert. The shy librarian in the data archives had been a communications specialist. The bumbling cargo handler in Bay 7 had been a sniper. Humanity's first contact with alien species had been peaceful. But humans had not survived as a species by trusting strangers. While diplomats spoke of friendship and trade, soldiers had prepared for war. Now that war had come to them. The first Valorian boarding shuttle docked at Bay 4 with the arrogant precision of a force that expected no resistance. Commander Jithrak led a squad of 12 elite Valorian Marines through the airlock, their ceremonial blue armor gleaming under the station's lights. They had done this dozens of times before. Overwhelming displays of force that convinced weaker species to surrender without a fight. They expected to find terrified civilians and maybe a few token security guards. Instead, they found Marcus Chen waiting for them. He still wore his janitor's coveralls, but everything else about him had changed. His posture was different. Loose, balanced, ready. His eyes tracked each Marine as they entered, automatically cataloging weapons, armor weak points, and movement patterns. In his hands, he held what looked like a standard maintenance tool. "Welcome to Nexus Station," Marcus said conversationally. "I'm afraid the docking bay is temporarily closed for cleaning." Commander Jithrak's mandibles clicked in amusement. Valorians found human humor primitive at best. "Step aside, Janitor. This is official Imperial business." "I understand," Marcus replied, "but you're tracking mud on my freshly cleaned floors." That was when the Valorians noticed that what they had taken for a maintenance tool was actually a military-grade plasma cutter, modified with components that definitely weren't standard station equipment. Marcus held it with the casual expertise of someone who knew exactly what it could do. "Last chance," Jithrak said, raising his pulse rifle. "Move or be moved." Marcus smiled. "You know, Commander, there's something you should understand about humans. We're not naturally aggressive. We don't conquer for the sake of conquering. We don't even particularly like fighting." The Valorian Marines began spreading out, trying to surround the lone human. "But," Marcus continued, his thumb moving to the plasma cutter's activation switch, "we're really, really good at it." What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades. Marcus moved like liquid lightning, the plasma cutter tracing precise arcs through the air. Valorian armor was designed to stop conventional energy weapons, but the modified plasma cutter cut through it like paper. In 30 seconds, 8 Marines were down, their weapons scattered across the deck. Commander Jithrak found himself on his back, staring up at a human who had somehow gotten behind him without making a sound. The plasma cutter's tip rested against his throat, right where his armor's neck seal created a vulnerable gap. "Now then," Marcus said pleasantly, "let's discuss proper docking procedures." Across the station, similar scenes were playing out in every docking bay. The Valorian boarding parties had expected easy victories against primitive humans. Instead, they encountered resistance that was surgical in its precision and devastating in its effectiveness. In Bay 7, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Kim, who had been working as a cargo handler for 2 years, demonstrated why human reflexes were considered impossible by most alien physiologists. She moved between incoming Valorian troops like a ghost, disabling their weapons with targeted electromagnetic pulses before they even realized she was there. In Bay 12, Dr. James Rodriguez had been posing as a maintenance technician while actually serving as the team's medical officer and biochemical warfare specialist. He released a cloud of perfectly harmless gas that nevertheless caused immediate respiratory distress in Valorians while having no effect on the other species present. The Valorian fleet commander, Admiral Coranvel, watched the tactical displays in growing disbelief. His boarding parties weren't just being repelled, they were being systematically dismantled by what his intelligence reports had described as unarmed maintenance workers. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "These are humans! They barely have a space force!" "Sir," the tactical officer replied hesitantly, "our troops are reporting that the humans appear to have extensive military training. Their weapons are highly modified standard equipment, but their tactics are uncomfortably familiar." Admiral Coranvel studied the battle reports. The humans weren't fighting like desperate civilians. They were fighting like soldiers who had planned for exactly this scenario. Every response was coordinated. Every counterattack was precisely targeted. They knew the station's layout better than his own teams did. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the station. It's coming from one of the humans." "Put it through." Marcus Chen's face appeared on the main view screen. He was back in his janitor's coveralls, but there was no mistaking the authority in his voice when he spoke. "Admiral, my name is Marcus Chen. I believe you have some of our guests aboard your ships." Coranvel's mandibles clicked in confusion. Your guests. Human, you are in no position to make demands. We have overwhelming firepower. Actually, Marcus replied, you have a problem. You see, Nexus Station processes a lot of garbage. Food waste, industrial byproducts, recyclable materials. It all goes through a very sophisticated processing system. The Admiral waited, unsure where this was going. The thing about garbage processing, Marcus continued, is that it requires a lot of sensors, atmospheric analyzers to check for toxic waste, particle scanners to identify recyclable materials, biological sensors to prevent contamination. Marcus paused to let that sink in. Those same sensors can detect other things, like the composition of your ship hulls, the power signatures of your weapon systems, the exact location of your command centers. Admiral Caranvel felt something cold settle in his stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that for 3 years, every ship that has docked at this station has been scanned, cataloged, and analyzed. We know your ships better than you do. We know where your armor is thickest and where it's weakest. We know where your power conduits run and where your backup systems are located. On the tactical display, red targeting indicators began appearing around every Valorian ship. They weren't coming from the station's defensive systems. Those had been disabled in the first assault. They were coming from somewhere else entirely. We also know, Marcus said, that it takes approximately 18 minutes for a distress signal to reach the nearest Valorian fleet command. Your signal went out 12 minutes ago. You're bluffing, Caranvel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Marcus smiled. Let me introduce you to some friends of mine. New contacts began appearing on the Valorian sensors, ships dropping out of hyperspace with the smooth precision of a military fleet. But they weren't human ships. At least, they didn't look human. They were sleek, angular vessels that didn't match any known design in the Valorian databases. What you're seeing, Marcus explained, are ships from the human expeditionary fleet. They've been waiting in the outer system for quite a while, long enough to study your tactical formations, your communication protocols, and your standard operating procedures. The human ships moved with eerie coordination, taking positions that maximized their tactical advantage while minimizing the risk to Nexus Station. It was a deployment pattern that spoke of careful planning and extensive practice. This is impossible, Caranvel whispered. Human technology is decades behind ours. You know, Admiral, that's a common misconception. Human technology isn't decades behind anyone else's. It's just different. We tend to focus on making things work rather than making them impressive. As if to demonstrate his point, the human ships opened fire, not with the flashy energy weapons favored by most species, but with kinetic projectiles that tore through Valorian shields like they weren't even there. Rail guns, Marcus explained helpfully. Very old technology by galactic standards, but humans have had a lot of time to perfect them. Also, they're much harder to defend against than energy weapons. Admiral Caranvel watched in horror as his fleet's shields that could stop any known energy weapon, proved useless against simple chunks of metal traveling at significant fractions of the speed of light. Impossible, he repeated. Our intelligence reports were exactly what we wanted you to believe, Marcus interrupted. You see, Admiral, humans learned something important during our first contact with alien species. We learned that everyone underestimates us, and we decided that was an advantage we should preserve. The human fleet continued its methodical dismantling of Valorian ships, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. They weren't trying to destroy the Valorian fleet. They were demonstrating that they could destroy it any time they chose. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus continued. You're going to order your boarding parties to return to their ships. You're going to withdraw from Nexus Station's space, and you're going to send a message to the Valorian Council explaining that humans are not as harmless as you thought. And if we refuse? Caranvel asked. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Admiral, you brought 3 dreadnoughts, 8 heavy cruisers, and 40 fighters to intimidate 1 space station. We brought 6 ships and disabled your entire fleet in under 10 minutes. Do you really want to see what happens if we stop playing nice? Crystalline Song of Seven had been watching the entire confrontation from the station's main observation deck, her crystal structure shifting through a spectrum of colors as she processed what she was seeing. Her academic understanding of human behavior was being completely rewritten. She wasn't the only one. Throughout Nexus Station, representatives of dozens of species were witnessing humanity's first open display of military capability. The implications would ripple through galactic politics for years to come. But Marcus wasn't thinking about politics. He was thinking about the Valorian Marines still aboard the station, the crew of the fleet that was now effectively at his mercy, and the careful balance that would determine whether this incident ended in peace or triggered a galactic war. Admiral, he said quietly, we don't want to be your enemies. Humans prefer cooperation to conquest, but we will defend ourselves and our allies. Admiral Caranvel looked at his tactical displays, at his disabled ships, at the human fleet that had appeared from nowhere and outmaneuvered his forces so completely that resistance was clearly futile. His military training told him to fight. His survival instincts told him to surrender. His political experience told him that either choice would have consequences that extended far beyond this single engagement. All Valorian forces, he announced over the fleet communications network, return to ships. We are withdrawing. As Valorian troops began filing back to their shuttles, Marcus finally allowed himself to relax slightly. The first phase was over, but he knew that word of this encounter would spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Soon, every species would know that humanity was not what it appeared to be. Crystalline Song of Seven approached him as he watched the Valorian shuttles depart. Your people have been preparing for this for years, she observed. Longer than that, Marcus admitted. Humans learned early that the galaxy can be a dangerous place. We decided to be ready. But why the deception? Why pretend to be primitive? Marcus turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something ancient and tired in his eyes. Because once people know what you're capable of, everything changes. Fear replaces curiosity. Suspicion replaces friendship. We wanted to understand our neighbors before they decided whether we were threats. And now? Marcus watched the last Valorian shuttle clear the station's docking bay. Now they know, and everything changes. In the depths of space, human deep space monitoring stations detected increased chatter on dozens of alien communication networks. Emergency sessions were being called. Intelligence services were frantically reviewing their assessments of human capabilities. Military planners were recalculating threat assessments. The age of human anonymity was ending. But as Marcus rolled his sleeves back down and picked up his cleaning supplies, he reflected that perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Humanity had spent centuries proving they could survive in isolation. Maybe it was time to see if they could thrive as equals among the stars. The real test was just beginning. 3 weeks after what galactic news networks were calling the Nexus incident, Marcus Chen sat in the same observation deck where his cover had first been blown. But nothing was the same anymore. The quiet corridors now buzzed with activity. Nexus Station had become the most important diplomatic location in the galaxy almost overnight. Representatives from dozens of species had arrived to negotiate new treaties with humanity. The Human Colonial Authority, which had operated in shadows for years, now maintained an official embassy in the station's diplomatic quarter. Marcus still wore his janitor's coveralls, but nobody mistook him for simple maintenance staff anymore. The coveralls now bore the insignia of the human expeditionary fleet, and when he walked through the corridors, aliens stepped aside with respectful nods. He wasn't entirely comfortable with the change. Commander Chen, a familiar harmonic voice chimed behind him. Might I join you? Marcus turned to see Crystalline Song of Seven approaching. Her crystal structure had grown more complex over the past 3 weeks, new formations sprouting as her understanding of galactic politics expanded. Her dissertation on human behavior had become the most requested academic paper in Jektar space. "Just Marcus," he said, gesturing to an empty chair beside him. "I never was much for formal titles." "Perhaps not," she replied, settling into the chair with a musical sound like wind chimes. "But the galaxy seems determined to give them to you anyway." Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see ships from a dozen species docked at the station's expanded berths. Valorian diplomatic vessels sat alongside Kresh trade ships and Saurog military observers. The sight would have been impossible a month ago. "Any word from the Valorian Council?" Marcus asked. "Ambassador Veltar delivered their formal response this morning," Crystalline Song of Seven replied. "They are prepared to discuss mutual defense agreements with humanity. I believe that is diplomatic language for, 'Please do not shoot us.'" Marcus chuckled. "That's probably for the best. We never wanted to fight anyone." A curious statement from someone whose people prepared for war for years. "Preparing for war and wanting it are different things," Marcus said. "Humans learned that lesson the hard way, many times. The best way to avoid a fight is to make sure you can win one if you have to." Across the observation deck, a group of young aliens from various species were gathered around a holographic display, reviewing tactical analyses of the Nexus incident. They spoke in hushed, respectful tones about human combat tactics and military technology. "Your people have certainly captured the galactic imagination," Crystalline Song of Seven observed. "The Kresh Collective has tripled their xenobiology research budget. The Saurog Empire is requesting military exchange programs. Even the isolationist Void Walkers have sent envoys to Earth." "And what about the Jektar?" Marcus asked. Her crystal structure shifted to warmer hues. "We are fascinated naturally. Your species has demonstrated behavioral patterns that challenge many of our established theories about intelligence and social development. My people are very eager to learn more about human psychology. Just remember that we're not laboratory specimens," Marcus warned gently. "Of course not. You are partners now. That is why I wished to speak with you today." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh. The Jektar Harmony has been considering humanity's proposal for the Galactic Cooperation Initiative. We believe there is great wisdom in creating formal protocols for peaceful first contact with emerging species. However, we have concerns about implementation." Marcus nodded. The initiative had been humanity's first formal proposal to the galactic community, a comprehensive plan for preventing the kind of misunderstandings that had led to the Nexus incident. It called for shared scientific research, cultural exchange programs, and joint military exercises designed to build trust rather than display force. "What kind of concerns?" he asked. "The proposal requires significant trust between species that have historically been competitors," she explained. "Many governments fear that cooperation could become exploitation. They worry that sharing military technology or scientific discoveries could leave them vulnerable to more aggressive neighbors." "Like the Valorians were vulnerable to us?" Marcus suggested. "Precisely. Your demonstration at Nexus has proven that appearances can be deceiving. If humans could hide their true capabilities for so long, what else might be hidden among the galactic community?" It was a fair question, and one that human diplomats had been grappling with for weeks. The revelation of humanity's hidden strength had shattered many assumptions about galactic power structures. If humans could deceive everyone so completely, who else might be hiding their true nature? "There's something I should tell you," Marcus said after a long pause. "We weren't the only ones." Crystalline Song of Seven's harmonics took on a questioning pitch. "I do not understand." "During our intelligence-gathering operations, we discovered that several other species have been downplaying their capabilities. The Jektar Harmony, for instance, has developed quantum computing technology far beyond what they've publicly demonstrated. The Sarog Empire has been testing gravitational manipulation devices that could revolutionize space travel. Even the Peaceful Botanical Collective has been experimenting with biological technologies that could reshape entire ecosystems. The implications hit her immediately. You mean? I mean that almost everyone has been lying about what they can do. Humanity just happened to be the most obvious about it when the Valorians forced our hand. Crystalline Song of Seven's crystal structure cycled through several colors as she processed this revelation. But why? Why would so many species choose to appear weaker than they are? Same reason we did, Marcus explained. Fear. When you don't know if your neighbors are friends or threats, you keep your best cards hidden. But that creates a cycle of mistrust where everyone is suspicious of everyone else, and nobody benefits from the cooperation that could solve all our problems. Hence the cooperation initiative, she said, understanding dawning in her harmonics. Hence the initiative, Marcus confirmed. The idea is to create a framework where species can gradually reveal their true capabilities in a controlled, mutually beneficial way. Shared research projects where everyone contributes their best ideas, joint exploration missions where each species brings their unique strengths, cultural exchanges that build genuine friendships instead of just diplomatic treaties. Through the windows, they could see a human transport ship docking at Bay 7. Marcus knew it carried the first group of human students selected for the new exchange program with the Jektar Harmony. Similar ships were departing for Kresh Space, Saurog territory, and dozens of other destinations. It is an ambitious vision, Crystalline Song of Seven said. But what if some species refuse to participate? What if they prefer the old system of suspicion and hidden agendas? Marcus pointed toward the Valorian diplomatic vessel docked at Bay 12. Even the Valorians are participating, and they have the most to lose from increased transparency. Their entire political system was based on being the dominant military force in the galaxy. Now they have to find new ways to matter. And if diplomacy fails? If some species choose aggression over cooperation? Marcus's expression grew serious. Then they'll discover that humanity wasn't the only species preparing for that possibility. The Cooperation Initiative isn't just about sharing our best technology. It's about making sure that any species that chooses violence will face unified opposition from everyone else. As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar figure approached their table. Teclon, Marcus's former supervisor, walked over with the careful dignity that Valorians used when they were trying to save face. "Commander Chen," he said formally, "might I have a word?" Marcus gestured to an empty chair. "Of course, Teclon, though I think we're a bit past the employer-employee relationship at this point." The Valorian's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment. "Indeed, I wish to apologize for my treatment of you during your time as a maintenance worker. I failed to see what you truly were." "You saw what I wanted you to see," Marcus replied. "That was the point. Perhaps, but I also chose to see only what confirmed my assumptions about human limitations. That was my failing, not yours." Teclon paused, seeming to gather courage. "I also wish to ask if the position you offered last week is still available." Crystalline Song of Seven's crystals chimed with curiosity. "Position?" "Teclon has experience managing complex facility operations," Marcus explained. "We've offered him a role coordinating the new joint research stations that the initiative will establish. It would mean working closely with humans and other species as equals." "The pay is actually better than my previous position," Teclon admitted. "But more importantly, the work has meaning beyond simple commerce, building understanding between species rather than just facilitating trade. Plus," Marcus added with a smile, "no more dealing with stubborn janitors who don't know their place." Teclon's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement this time. I believe I am beginning to understand that humans may be many things, but they are rarely simple. As the evening shift approached, Marcus made his usual rounds through the station, but instead of cleaning, he was checking on the various diplomatic delegations and research teams that now called Nexus home. The former janitor had become an unofficial ambassador, helping to smooth the cultural misunderstandings that inevitably arose when diverse species tried to work together. In the hydroponics bay, human botanists were working alongside botanical collective researchers to develop new food crops that could thrive in different atmospheric conditions. The project would ensure that future space stations could support multiple species comfortably. In the engineering section, creche technicians were studying human reactor designs while human engineers marveled at creche nanotechnology. The resulting collaboration was producing power systems more efficient than either species had managed alone. In the communications center, Jectar harmonics specialists were working with human linguists to develop universal translation protocols that preserved cultural nuance instead of just conveying basic meaning. Every section told the same story. Species that had spent centuries as suspicious neighbors were discovering the benefits of genuine cooperation. It wasn't always easy. Cultural differences created constant challenges. Competitive instincts sometimes overwhelmed cooperative ones. But progress was undeniable. Marcus found himself back at the observation deck as the station's artificial evening cycle began. The stars outside reminded him of his first night aboard Nexus, 3 years ago, when he had been just another anonymous human trying to stay invisible in an alien galaxy. Crystalline Song of Seven joined him again, her crystal structure now glowing softly in the dimmed lighting. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The simplicity of being just a janitor?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. There was something peaceful about knowing exactly what was expected of you each day. Clean the floors, empty the trash, fix the broken things. Simple problems with simple solutions. But you would not return to that life if you could?" "No," he said firmly. "What we're building here is too important. For the first time in galactic history, we have a chance to create something better than competition and mistrust. A community where different species support each other instead of just tolerating each other. Even if it means giving up the advantages of secrecy, even if it means humanity can never again surprise its enemies the way you surprised the Valorians." Marcus smiled. "Crystalline, the greatest advantage isn't keeping your enemies guessing about your capabilities. It's turning your enemies into allies so you don't need those capabilities in the first place." Through the windows, they could see the lights of dozens of ships representing dozens of species. Each one carried beings who had chosen cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, hope over suspicion. "Besides," Marcus added, rolling up his sleeves to reveal the tattoos that had started everything, "humans have always been good at adapting to new situations. I think we'll manage just fine in a galaxy where everyone knows what we can do." As the station settled into its night cycle, Marcus made one final round through the corridors. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new diplomatic crises to resolve, new cultural barriers to overcome. But tonight, for the first time since humanity had reached for the stars, Marcus Chen felt like they were truly home among them. The age of secrets was ending. The age of cooperation had begun. And sometimes that started with a simple human janitor rolling up his sleeves and getting to work.